Sean drove 125 miles in 2.5 hours. At that same rate, how long would it take him to drive 300 miles? So now we're not interested in how much gas it would take, we're interested in how much time it would take. So let's make our let statement. They ask how long would it take him to drive 300 miles. So we write let the time it would take to drive 300 miles be x. Now this is another problem that we can solve using proportions, because the amount of time it takes to get somewhere is proportional to how far that distance is, how far the drive is. If you have to drive twice as far, it's probably going to take about twice as long. If you've got to drive 6 times as far, it's probably going to be about 6 times as long. Now we know that this all depends on traffic and how fast you're driving and all sorts of things. So to be honest, there's no way of calculating an exact answer here. There's no way of knowing for sure. But this is the best way, without knowing any more information, to get an estimate for how long it would take him to drive 300 miles, so he can tell his aunt when to expect him if he's visiting his aunt or something like that. Now we're going to start with a table to organize our information. Now we're told Sean drove 120 miles in 2.5 hours, so the different quantities in this problem are distance, which is measured in miles, and then time, which is measured in hours. And again, we have information based off of 2 different trips. There's the shorter trip, where he goes 125 miles, and the longer trip, where he goes 300 miles. So that's how we can label the 2 rows, the shorter trip and the longer trip. Now in the shorter trip, we're told that he drove 125 miles in 2.5 hours. So the distance is 125, and the time is 2.5. And for the longer trip, we know he needs to go 300 miles, but we don't know how much time it'll take. So we said that that was x. And now we can set up our proportion. 125 over 300 equals 2.5 over x. Now this is a little intimidating because we have a fraction inside a fraction. That 1/2 inside the bigger fraction. It's like fraction inception. But we can make this a little bit easier by rewriting that as a decimal. So we can instead write 125 over 300 equals 2.5 over x. Now we can solve this by cross-multiplying. We can take 300 times 2.5, and 300 times 2.5 is 750. Then on the other side, we can take 125 times x, which gives us 125x. And if we want to get x alone, we divide both sides by 125. And 750 divided by 125 ends up being 6. So we have 6 equals x. We can go back up to our let statement, x equals 6, and that was time. This problem, time is measured in hours, so 6 hours. How long would it take him to drive 300 miles? It would take him 6 hours to drive 300 miles. And that is our answer.